Hey guys, so the heater hose on my 96 Accord had been leaking and it had just been a little bit ripped, but ultimately it became a pretty big hole. And as you can see over here, it was leaking pretty profusely. This point is right below the distributor, and there had been some oil leaking from this distributor for quite a long time. And that's the reason that it got swollen and then eventually formed a leak. In order to get access to the leaking heater hose, we have to first remove the air intake, which is marked over here. I have a separate video which goes through the air intake removal. So I'm just gonna go ahead and speed up the video here. But do check that other video out if you want to see that in a bit more detail. Now that the air intake has been removed, I'll go ahead and remove this lower side branch tube. Again, just a 10 mm wrench to loosen the clamp. We also need to remove this other hose from the clip, which is attached to the tube. It is just for routing purposes. And once that is off, you can just pull off the tube. Just to be cautious, I'm going to go ahead and plug these two holes with some rags. I don't want anything to get dropped in there. Next up on the list is the distributor. The hose connects right below it, so it needs to come off. Similar to air intake removal, I have a separate video which goes through the distributor removal in a lot more detail, so I'm just gonna go ahead and speed up that part here. With the distributor off, I inserted this towel into the hole where the distributor goes in. This takes care of any oil drips, and it also makes sure that I don't end up dropping something into that hole by mistake. With that done, we now have clear access to the heater hose, and we start removing it by removing this clip on the engine side. Since the hose was swollen, it took a bit of patience to remove it. And these needle nose pliers with 90-degree angle were really helpful for removing all the clamps. I used that in combination with this 45-degree angle pliers. At this point, after trying so much, I suspected that apart from the hose being swollen, it might actually be stuck onto the head outlet as well. So I started using this curved pick to try to pull it out while I use the plier to loosen the clamp. Sorry, the hose clamp is a little bit out of focus here. It's actually focusing on my arm. I guess I got too involved in this step and forgot to verify that it is actually in focus while recording. It was certainly stuck on there, and it did take me some time, but at least in my experience, it was a combination of the pick, pliers, and patience, which eventually worked. As you can see, with each try, it is coming off a bit by bit. Now, with one end removed, we are ready to remove the other end. This end is towards the rear of the engine bay, towards the firewall. You can see that it connects to a part which has another hose connected to it. That other hose goes towards the firewall. You do not want to do anything with that other hose. Just disconnect the heater hose which is closer to the engine. It is somewhat hard to get to the clamp on this side, especially if you're trying to also record at the same time. There's really not much room. So I'm going to try to go from the other side, that is along the direction of the hose. There still might not be enough room to actually perform the task and get a good view, but let's see if we can get something. What worked for me here was to try to use the regular small needle nose pliers to turn the clamp towards the top, and then use the 90-degree angle needle nose pliers for better leverage. As you can see, once I was able to get the 90-degree angle needle nose pliers on there, it became a much simpler task. Once the clamp was removed, I was able to use this long circle plier to hold on to the hose and pull it off. All of these pliers were part of a 11-inch long plier set that I got off of Amazon. It has come in really handy for some of these projects. At this point, I went ahead and removed that clamp completely from this end. And this was needed because the hose needs to be fished through another clip for it to be totally removed. If we leave this clamp on there, it won't be able to be fished out through that clip. At this point, the hose is only held by that round clip, which is below this upper, thicker radiator hose. It's pretty hard to get a good shot of it, but if you're doing this, it will be pretty obvious where it is. You simply have to slowly pull the hose out towards the front of the engine. Now we are ready to start putting it all back together. I have the replacement original Honda parts here, and the part numbers are up on the screen. I could have used the original clamps, but the new ones were pretty inexpensive, and the original ones had served well for around 28 years. So I decided to go ahead and replace those as well. Whenever I'm replacing the parts, I do try to put the old ones and new ones next to each other to ensure that they are actually identical. They should be, but you never really know. Here I'm comparing the new hose to the older one. Now, going in the reverse order of how I pulled everything out, I'm going to go ahead and fish the hose back in through that clip. I found it easier to go from the front towards the back. Just like pulling out, it requires some patience. Make sure you don't install the clamps on the hose before doing this. As you can see, it took me some time to actually get it through the clip, but I'm just gonna go ahead and speed up the video here. Once it went through the clip, it was relatively easy to push it further through from the front. Just keep twisting and pushing it. At this point, I went ahead and put on the hose clamp on the front end. Just make sure that it is pushed far enough in so that it does not interfere with getting hose onto the outlet later. I also put the hose clamp on the rear end at this point. The hose was just in a better position at this point, giving me better leverage with the plier. Just twisting and pushing the hose now to get it into the final position. Basically, I'm trying to align the front end of the hose with the outlet at this point. Once it was aligned, I just got it slightly onto the outlet so that it stays in place while I work on the other end. This also got the other end of the hose in relatively correct position. Once I verified that the hose was positioned somewhat correctly on both the ends, I started working on pushing the hose over the connector on the front end. It mostly involved taking my time with pushing the hose onto the connector, but at times I did also end up using the circle pliers to help slide it on. Sorry, you can't really see it in this shot because of the cruise control cable being in the way. But at this point, the hose was totally onto the connector, the front end. The next step was to get the clamp onto the hose over the connector. Again, using the 90 degrees angle needle nose pliers here. Now, moving on to the rear connector. It is a bit hard to see because of the tight space here, but ultimately it is the same deal as the front connector. The trick is to line up the hose totally parallel to the connector and push it on. For what it's worth, this end did get onto the connector much easier than the front one. And then just slide the clamp on. Now we are ready to install the distributor back. It helps to look into the hole where the distributor goes in to make sure the notches on the distributor align correctly. And as I had mentioned earlier, the notches are offset from the center, so it wouldn't go in 180 degrees off. And if it doesn't go in, don't force it. Just take your time and slowly slide it in. As you can see, if everything lines up, it goes in pretty easily. Just getting the fasteners on there now. Now it's time to line up those red and black marks that I made earlier to make sure the timing is correct. Once everything is lined up, the fasteners need to be tightened to 16 foot-pound. I didn't show it here, but at this point the connectors can be clipped back the same way they were taken off. Next, we reinstall the ignition wires onto the spark plug wells. And finally, reinstall the connectors. We are now ready to reinstall the air intake. We start by installing this side branch tube first. Just slide it on and tighten the clamp. Before reinstalling these, I did take this opportunity to clean the tubes a bit. As you install different tubes, find any hose routing clips on them and reattach the relevant hoses to those clips. You can see me routing one of them here. Moving on to the main air intake tube now. Starting with the rear end. Just wiggle it on there. And tighten the clamp on that end. Reroute hoses in the back. Reroute this hose as well. And then attach the side branch tube or the lower side branch tube to the main tube. Attach the cruise control cable to the wall cover. Now moving on to the front of the car towards the air filter housing. Push in the air intake tube for the resonator chamber. You can also see that I have some fresh Honda coolant here. Since some coolant leaked during the hose replacement, which is kind of inevitable, I topped off the coolant after I finished reinstalling everything. And the final step, apart from the coolant refill, is to reattach this breather tube to the air intake. Just loosen the clamp, insert it in, and let go of the clamp. That should be it.